Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr Stringer. I'm delighted to take part in this debate today. I would normally be in the other chamber for the International Women's Day debate, but I rise today and I want to speak particularly about widowed parents' allowance on behalf of two women in particular in my constituency who are here today because it's their voices that need to be heard in debates like this. They are the voices of women who never wanted to be in the position that they are in now, who never expected to be, well, not alone claiming widowed parents' allowance, one of them isn't, and I'll go on to why that is, because tragedy struck their families in the most cruel and horrific way, in which their partner was taken away from them. The strength and courage that they have shown in campaigning on this issue has been incredibly inspiring to me as their MP, and so I am proud to be in this chamber today to talk about their experiences and why they should be heard in this debate, if not taking part in the debate about International Women's Day. There are so many challenges when it comes to inequality. We must fight them all. This feels to me a most basic example of that, an example of perhaps the unintended consequences in the Minister and the Government's thinking when it comes to widowed parents' allowances. And I hope today, by reading into the record some of their experiences, we can ask the Minister to think again about some of the choices that the Government has made because of the likely devastating consequences. I want to talk first of all about Ros. Ros's husband sadly died in 2014. He had been ill for some time before that, and so actually she had to give up work, had to work with her children to support them as their father deteriorated. A horrific experience for anyone to deal with at a young age. To then have to deal with the financial consequences of that only compounds the grief that her family felt. In particular, Ros then suddenly became a single parent to two children and found that widowed parents' allowance was, as she describes it to me, a lifeline. The work that she did was not work that was easy to combine with suddenly having to be a full-time carer for her young children. She works in the theatre. And she herself was struggling with the grief of having lost her husband. Now, Ros has done the calculations about what the changes in the scheme that the government is proposing would have meant for her and her family. The Minister claims that this is not about making money, it's about a fair change in the system. I have to say, when I look at the figures and I see Ros and how Ros is affected, I don't think that is the case. I think this is very clearly a cut in the budget designed to save the government money, but I believe it's a short-term saving for a long-term loss. Ros and her family would, under the new scheme, have lost out of over £100,000 over the course of the lifetime of her children. Money that has allowed her to look after her children, to keep her family and her household going, to be a mother to two children who are grieving for their father, and to start to put her family's life back together again. When she looks at what the new scheme would mean, as she points out, this new lump sum, well, that would probably have been taken up in all the funeral costs that come straight away. So that is not a different, more welcome situation. And certainly the pressure of not having a consistent income, of having to worry about what would happen after 18 months would have consumed her. As she says, after 6 months, she was still drowning in paperwork to do with the death of her husband and trying to cope with the impact for her children. Grieving doesn't stop at 18 months. So why should the support that we offer to those families affected by these sorts of tragedies stop as well? As Ros points out, these payments are a recognition for the contribution that her husband had paid into the system when he was alive, his national insurance. Indeed, as she points out, it creates quirks. A friend of hers who has 4 children gets £50 less a week than she does because her husband was 10 years younger than Ros's husband. But if we accept the principle that these payments are based on the payments that partners have paid into the system, then surely what matters is whether the payments have been made and whether the partner was part of that relationship. I say that because whilst I disagree with the member for Birkenhead in his support for the idea that we should terminate the support at 18 months, because I do not understand why 18 months is an appropriate cut-off date. I'm happy to. I was about to say I did agree with him on some other things, so I'll just set that up for him.
Right. It's just that the government's original proposal to stop it after a year. Therefore, I thought 18 months was better than a year.
I understand that. As I hope I can make the case, I think we should support families who are in grief. I don't think we should ask them to take on poverty and possible debt on top of dealing with grief. And I don't think we should put a time limit on grief when it comes to these sorts of cases. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of families, but we are talking about families facing one of the most horrific, soul-destroying experiences one can have. But I do agree with him about the need also to update the way in which our welfare system works. And the second case I want to talk to, I hope is familiar to the Minister, because I have actually written to the Minister before about this lady, because Joanna, who has two beautiful young girls, I'm lucky enough to see their pictures on Facebook as they're growing up. I feel almost like I'm watching them vicariously. But one of her daughters was born, sadly, after her partner had he suddenly died. Joanna had to fight to get her partner's husband and partner's name, David, onto the baby's birth certificate because they weren't married. They were clearly in a loving relationship. They had been together for a long period of time. They had chosen not to be married. That should surely be their choice. It shouldn't be the state that then uses that to penalise Joanna and her family. And yet, as far as I can see, over the last couple of years, we have penalised Joanna in many different ways. Whether it is the £1,500 that she had to pay for a DNA test to be able to prove this gentleman was the father of her daughter to have him on the birth certificate, or now, where she doesn't receive a penny in widowed parents' allowance, despite her partner paying into the system, just as Roz's partner had. They are no less a family because they do not have a piece of paper. And in 2017, surely we should recognise the need of those children to equally have the support that Widows' Parents' Allowance would provide to that family. The money that helps not just in keeping a roof above their head, but taking the pressure of debt off that family so that Joanna can be a mum to her two lovely daughters and start to put their lives back together following the sudden death of their father. It is these sorts of real issues and real people that our welfare system has to be able to work with. And it is why the cuts that the Minister is making, particularly when it comes to widowed parents' allowances, make no sense to me at all, because they do not see the people behind these cases. I've been lucky enough through the organisation Widowed and Young to see other examples that are similar to the stories of my two constituents, Ros and Joanna. Their cases are no less compelling. So I want to ask the Minister today if he will reconsider this 18-month bar, if he will look again at the actual people behind the statistics, meet with them, hear their stories, understand the reality of becoming a widow at a young age and what impact that has on a family, and ask again how we can do what we all want the welfare system to do, which is to support people. It is to help to be that lifeline at that critical time, to help get these families back on their feet, because the changes that he has made and his government is making, I fear, will not simply not help. They could actually make things worse for these families. They could bring debt, the fear of what will happen. It will force people who are still grieving after a mere 18 months to make decisions that may be against the best interests of their family because they're short of cash. As Ros said, this money has been a lifeline for her. She is one of the lucky ones because she would qualify under the old scheme. But none of these people are lucky because, after all, they've lost a loved one. And that's what we're trying to get at here. Ros, Joanna, all the women and men indeed involved in this campaign deserve better from us. And I hope the Minister will at least commit today to meet with them, to understand better the situation that they're going to be in when these changes come through.